Every day I am bombarded with questions. What would happen if the moon exploded? Can we eat jellyfish? What is a marsh? What color were dinosaurs? Why do we sweat? Is God a man or a woman? If you aren't aware, I'm the father of a child who will be 6 years old next month. I hear these questions most often on the drive home from my son's kindergarten, and it's like machine gun bullets. It's like one after another. There's no pause in the questioning. It just keeps going on. My most frequent response to these questions that might have a definite answer is, I don't know. Ask me again when we arrive home and we can look it up. Sometimes the response to other questions without clear answers is, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. What do you think? And by the way, my son has thanked me for letting him ask questions and then looking up answers. Apparently this is something that he really appreciates. Dale McGowan estimates in his book, Parenting Beyond Belief, that children will ask approximately, now this is an approximation, 427,050 questions between their 2nd and 5th birthdays. Now, I don't know how you can get an estimation that's 427,050, but I would love to see the math. That's an awful lot of questions. I cannot imagine how he came up with that, but I suspect that his estimates are low. If children are not discouraged from asking questions and seeking answers, then they will grow into adults who ask questions and seek answers. If they are encouraged to seek answers without limitations and encouraged to think for themselves, then they will probably experience awe and wonder with this world. They might also become Unitarian Universalists, because the asking of questions without limitations and the experience of answers produces awe and wonder and new directions. Unitarian Universalists, adult Unitarian Universalists, retain the spirit of childhood in some ways. They tend to often to ask questions and to experience awe and wonder in ways that I think those in other faith communities do not. Our way of being religious is not one that gives answers, but it is one that encourages the spiritual quest. I think that we experience awe and wonder in ways that are not typical of most religious traditions. Children start out curious. They change over time. Perhaps it is because adults are often afraid to admit they do not know the answers to their questions. In a culture that expects us to know so much, perhaps it is intimidating not to know the answers to children's questions. Perhaps we're just accustomed to not wanting to admit that we don't know. Carl Sagan wrote of his concern that adults were hampering normal development. He wrote, I find many adults are put off when young children pose scientific questions. Why is the moon round? The children ask. Why is the grass green? What is a dream? How deep can you dig a hole? When is the world's birthday? Why do we have toes? Too many teachers and parents answer with irritation or ridicule, or quickly move on to something else. What did you expect the moon to be? Square? Children soon recognize that somehow this kind of question annoys the grown-ups. A few more experiences like it, and another child has been lost to science. Why adults should pretend to omniscience before 6-year-olds, I can't for the life of me understand. What's wrong with admitting we don't know something? Is our self-esteem so fragile? Sagan has a point. This is not the way to rear children. The questions are to be respected. We do not know the answers, and at our best, we do not show annoyance at children's questions. Unitarian Universalists, at our best, encourage children to develop curiosity, to find ways to explore answers, to think about and experience the world without being hampered by religious or other beliefs that might hinder enlightenment. This is not something that our society wants children to do. Our society does not want us to ask questions. To ask questions is disruptive and confusing. Ask a lot of questions and one might discover dangerous answers that encourage change and possibility. And this happens in the lives of so many children. Carl Sagan also wrote later, you go talk to kindergartners or first grade kids. You find a class full of science enthusiasts. They ask deep questions. They ask, why do we have toes? What is the birthday of the world? Why is grass green? These are profound, important questions. They just bubble right out of them. You go talk to 12th graders, and there's none of that. They become incurious. Something terrible has happened between kindergarten and 12th grade. Carl Sagan was a scientist. He wrote about questioning from that perspective. This observation is applicable to spirituality and justice as well. Children ask many questions. If they are given answers that discourage them from thinking differently or exploring, then they might be stuck in a stage of spiritual development later as adults. One of the most common journeys of adult Unitarian Universalists is that of growing up in another faith tradition that put boundaries around spirituality and social change. There are questions that could not be asked. Usually, either someone kept questioning as a child into adulthood or had an experience that provoked questionings later. The answers that had been taught could not fully answer or respond to the experience or questioning. So curiosity and a desire to explore sent that person on a quest that eventually led to the door of a Unitarian Universalist church. That was my experience as well. I grew up in a faith tradition that had answers that forbade questioning, that believed that its beliefs were so true that it refused to work in any fashion with any other faith traditions, even those that were also conservative, Protestant, and Southern. Lest members be led astray by deviations from the denomination's fundamentalist beliefs. Adherents were constantly threatened with hellfire and damnation. Though charitable work was acceptable, actively changing society or challenging systems of oppression was actively condemned. Finding Unitarian Universalism, reigniting my questioning and community with others who were also seeking and questioning. Being in community enabled me to re-examine the faith of my childhood and meet again the 10-year-old that I once was. It's interesting to have a conversation with your 10-year-old self. It can happen in your head. And that was part of the spirituality of coming into the Unitarian Universalist Church. It was a moment of rediscovery and opening doors that had been shut for so long. Maybe it was a bit like coming out of a theological closet. I don't know exactly what that experience might be, but it seems like that. For those who grew up Unitarian Universalist, curiosity is also an aspect of spirituality. Children are encouraged to ask questions into adulthood and to seek out answers. Unitarian Universalist children's curricula does not give concrete answers to all questions that a child might have, but does encourage children to work for a better world and to follow their own path. It seems to me that this has greater implications, though, than one might imagine. 21 years ago, the College Board, the organization that created the Scholastic Aptitude Test, the SAT, began tracking test scores by religious affiliation. 21 years ago, the first time they did this, kids who are Unitarian Universalists got the highest scores of any religious body, followed by Jews and Hindus. Since then, we've slipped a bit, but Unitarian Universalist kids still score much higher than average. Of course, this could be explained by our congregations having high levels of education among our members. Smart parent, smart kid, goes the old reasoning. This does not mean that all of us are brilliant, but the most Unitarian Universalists have experience with higher education, and that experience may inspire children to achieve or give them the tools and confidence that they can also enter college. At the time, though, when this information made the New York Times, this created a buzz among the Unitarian Universalist clergy. Unitarian Universalist ministers seemed confident then that the high scores were due to children being brought up to ask questions and to think critically. That is certainly an aspect of our tradition, but being a Unitarian Universalist, one can even question that. Another aspect of seeking and asking questions with few boundaries is that we are capable of awe and wonder when we find something that speaks to our spiritual yearning. It might be something that we experienced in everyday life, like the realization about how we experience the passage of time. It might be something profound as new insight into dying, as we reflect on those we have known. It might be a deeper and new understanding of the nature of God or goddess, as we find something that opens our perception to life and the universe. At such times, we are most visibly like children. We take delight in the sharing of experiences or an answer to a question that has been with us. The process of learning is a mode of understanding our questions. Along with curiosity, learning leads to awe and wonder. Megan Cuzzolino is an education researcher at Harvard University, and her area of study is awe. She studies how people find awe at work. She writes, "We often think of awe as momentous, all-encompassing emotion that can only happen on rare occasions in one's life, such as when we visit a natural wonder like the Grand Canyon or witness the birth of a child. However, milder forms of awe also exist and can be elicited with greater frequency and less effort through experiences such as exposure to nature, feeling a sense of mindfulness or presence, or learning something new and perspective changing, perspective shifting. This is the kind of awe akin to our spiritual search for truth and meaning. It is so normal that anyone can have it. Exposure to nature, feeling a sense of mindfulness or presence, or learning something new and perspective shifting. How many times have you come to church on a Sunday morning and heard someone talk excitedly about a movie or book or a museum exhibit or an interpersonal experience that changed their perspective or taught them something new? In my experience with you and with most Unitarian Universalist congregations, this happens almost every Sunday. Why do we bring things like that to talk about at a Unitarian Universalist church? I doubt that people in other religious traditions are so ready to share things that make them think differently. Why bring this to church? Cuzzolino's research into awe was with a group of 30 scientists. She found that The participants defined awe as having a deep association with the process of scientific discovery. Their definitions and examples of awe in science were largely derived from new realizations or aha moments. Some of these moments came from big conceptual understandings about complex ideas like the genome or relativity for the first time. Notably, however, the examples that were top of mind for most participants and that seemed most powerful came from their personal experience of discovery. In other words, they had a moment of realization or perspective changing, and it was deeply personal. The other realization was that there was awe in sharing their personal experience with the scientific community. The second finding was that participants' all experiences were connected to their membership within the scientific community. And talking about their moments of discovery, participants realized that their work was contributing to a larger body of knowledge, even if it was in a very small way. The third realization of the experience of awe was that participants resoundingly agreed that the main effect about motivation, experiences of awe in science, are one of the reasons that scientists persist in their work in the face of challenges and frustrations. A number of participants described awe as a source of fuel. As I read this article, I recognize that this is not unlike what happens in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Our search for meaning leads us to ask questions. Sometimes we experience something such as exposure to nature, as feeling the sense of mindfulness or presence, or learning something new and perspective shifting. Then there is a realization that all experiences are connected to their membership within the community. We share our experiences that change us, often encouraging others to try them and discover what they can. Our third Unitarian Universalist principle calls us to accept one another and to encourage spiritual growth in our congregations. We do this not by urging other people to believe as we do, but by sharing our experiences and acknowledging that this experience changed me. It may change you as well. Like the scientists who Cuzzolino interviewed, the moments of awe also fuel our search for truth and meaning. Scientists, as Carl Sagan wrote, are in the mindset to ask questions. Our experiences of awe, as those 30 scientists encountered, encourage us to ask more questions and to seek more opportunities to have our perspectives changed. To experience something that evokes awe for a Universalist, Unitarian Universalist, called us to share it with others. This happens every single week. No, not the grandeur of the Grand Canyon or the birth of a child, but like a work of art or a museum exhibit, or a walk in the woods, or a book, or an encounter with somebody from a different culture. These evoke awe, and the experience is shared. And in all this process, we have the spirit of a child who asks questions, who experiences awe and wonder and shares it with others. And you know that children share amazement with the world? We are like the child whose awe also causes questions to come forth and fire further exploration. We are not all scientists, but we do ask questions and experience awe similarly. And the last 2 months of this church year, we are endeavoring to start up a program for children. Some have said that we need to expand programming for children in order to grow the church. There is some truth to that, but it harkens back to another era. People still do come to church to educate their children about religion and social justice. The days of yore when everyone did this, though, has passed. We need to provide liberal religious education because the world needs more Unitarian Universalists. Our gift to the world might be children who grow up asking questions, who act in ways that will create a better tomorrow. I know that this is ambitious. We who are of a certain age cannot replicate our experience completely, but we can hand down a way of being that is open to curiosity and awe, a way that knows that the promised land is far away and still hopes that the next generation will move us closer to the blessed community. The way that we are religious is worthy of continuing. In closing, this is a selfish reason for wanting the children with us, but it is important to us nonetheless. Children are important to Unitarian Universalism in ways that we have explored together today. They are engaged naturally in the same kind of quest that we adults are engaged intentionally. In their curiosity and awe, they remind us of who we are. May they always remind us to ask the reason why and encourage us to seek out experiences that promote learning and growth. May they always remind us of the child who is in us and who is not afraid to explore and to love. So be it. Amen.